Hi guys, welcome to today's episode of Coffee Catch Ups with Endurance Athletes. You may notice that I am hopefully using the mic correctly this time. I have it approximately the right distance in front of me, I hope. So I hope today's audio quality is a bit better. So today's episode is going to be a little different. It's a solo episode because I figured by now we're nearly 10 episodes in, and I realized that I actually never introduced myself. And obviously, some of you are listening from abroad. You're not all my friends and family who know who I am. So I thought it might be helpful just to have a bit of an introduction in case any of you were curious about who you're listening to yapping, essentially. So it will be a bit shorter than the normal episodes, I hope, unless it turns into, like a free therapy session, which maybe it will. That could be handy. So we'll see. But I'm essentially just going to tell you a bit about who I am, what I do, um, not why I'm qualified to talk to you about running, because I'm probably not at all. I just like speaking to endurance athletes, essentially, is why I started the podcast. But I will get on to that. So let's do the basic awkward intros where, pretend I'm in a group introducing myself. So my name is Helen. I'm from East Sussex. That's where I grew up, but I have lived in Glasgow for the past since 2017. Yeah, I started university there in 2017, so the last 7 years. I've actually recently moved two different places. I will get to that. But yeah, so I had quite a sporty background growing up. I started football when I was about seven, which I really, really loved. I carried that on until I was about 19, I think, when I left school. And yeah, I was in a team for that. We played at county level. It was, yeah, one of my loves growing up. I started ballet, which doesn't go with football. I got that a lot. I realized this. When I was really, really young, I think I must have been, I mean, technically two. I realized that sounds like how could you possibly start that when you were two? They have you running around like a dance hall carrying puppets is essentially what I remember from it. And I carried that on until I was again 19, and I took all my grades in that. And then I kind of had to make a decision whether I wanted to go to a professional school, which I wouldn't have necessarily gotten in, but whether I wanted to pursue that full time. And well, obviously I made the decision that I didn't because I thought, I don't know, I think as a female teenager, especially, you kind of struggle with societal pressures to look a certain way, and I think that maybe the ballet path wasn't quite right for me in regards to that because from what I saw, it was even more pressure, and I was already struggling with some eating habits. So there were other factors that went into the decision as well. I guess I didn't think I would have a very good career if I did try and go down that path. And also, I never really looked the part for ballet, I don't think, because I had tree trunk thighs from playing football, and I could never decide between the two. So anyway, I also played tennis from quite a young age. My sister was always much better than me. She went to the competitions and stuff. I never quite had the interest in doing that because I was more hooked on football, I think. But yeah, I still really enjoyed that. So I balanced those for really my whole life until I was leaving school. And I also played hockey for the school team. So a lot of sports, a lot of variety of the sports, which I actually really miss now. Since going to uni, I kind of, well, I took a gap year before I went to uni, and I that's when I started running. And really, since then, I've become pretty much all about running. And if I'm not, it's because I'm injured, so I'm doing something else. But I just figured that really I can't mesh all those sports together. without completely burning out, which is what I've experienced anyway. So to go back a step, yeah, that was the sporting history. What else have I done with my life? I went to a grammar school in Kent, which was basically a science-based school, which is how I ended up doing a physics degree later on. Really, I think uni was kind of not pushed on us, but it wasn't, not many other options were discussed, I think, at the school. Or even in my friend group, it was kind of just expected that that's what you would do. But I wasn't sure when I left school, so I did take a gap year. I mean, this was also partly because when I was 17, my dad got diagnosed with cancer. So I partly felt I wanted to stay home for a little bit with him because he was going through different treatments at that time. So on my gap year, I was lucky enough. I went to Spain for a couple months because my auntie lived over there. So I learned some Spanish that's probably already gone by now, but I had a really great time. And then I came home and I worked. I took my full lifeguard qualification. I was working, helping look after dad and just spending time with family, really. And that's when I actually started running because I had lost is maybe the wrong word. But I just wasn't doing, I didn't have the same opportunities to do those team sports, I guess. And I was missing that element of exercise, competition, like pushing yourself basically. And I was bored. I was a little bored. So I decided that I was going to set myself a challenge and I was going to raise money for Spana, an animal charity, because I thought it was a little cliche, starting running, raising money for charity. That is what everyone does. But I did need it was half a selfish challenge and a half that I really loved animals, which is why I chose that charity. It's a working animals charity, mainly donkeys, and donkeys have a special place in my heart. So I decided I was going to run 3 half marathons. This is without running at all. I was just a little cocky about it, maybe because I was like, oh, I'm fit. I've done loads of sports. I'll be absolutely fine. Not knowing anything about running. So I decided, I think it was the Torbay half marathon one weekend, and then I had to travel to Birmingham for the Black Country half. And then the next weekend, it was a half marathon in Wales. And I did not realize when I signed up to it, but it was apparently the hilliest in the UK. And my race photos at the end, I'm looking very angry. I'm very cross. It was just hell. Like I had already run those two, and I hadn't. I'll be honest. This seems to be a theme throughout my running. Actually, I had not trained enough for what I was doing. But I did have a great time, and that is what hooked me on running completely. It's really since then I've been pretty obsessed with it. Um, so yeah, the furthest run I'd done before I did that challenge, I think was about 7K. But I was fine. I managed it. I had fun. I was absolutely fine. So if you are considering a half marathon at the moment, or you're considering bumping up the distance, just go for it. Just not, you know, don't go from a 5K to an ultra, is what I would recommend. And then from there, I did decide I was going to go to uni, and I initially was down actually to study mechanical engineering at Glasgow. But about a week before, because I'm very indecisive, I decided that I wanted to do physics instead. And I was lucky enough that they let me change. So yeah, that's how I ended up doing a physics degree. And I do get asked a few times. In fact, I had counselling recently, and this was one of the questions that he asked me. He was like, "Okay, well, why physics? Given the way that you talk about it, is this really difficult thing that you don't relate to?" It was a couple of reasons. One of them makes sense. One of them was probably a bit stupid. One reason was that my physics teacher at my school had predicted me a C in my A level and said that there was no way that I could do a physics degree. So that made me, stubborn. The stubbornness kicked in, and I got an A in my A level because I worked so hard at it after he said that. And it was like, well, screw you, I'm going to go do a physics degree if you said that I can't. But actually, his advice was correct. He did only say that. I mean, I partly think it was a tactic because he knew that, I would get angry enough and go and study harder than I had been and as hard as I should have been. And it worked. But the other reason I think he said it was because maths never came naturally to me. And he said, well, that's basically just a maths degree and you'll really struggle with that. And he was bang on the money. I really struggled for 4 years doing it. But it was a love-hate relationship. I did enjoy it in the end. The other reason, well, I lost my train of thought there. And the other reason was because I thought doing a physics degree gave me more options than maybe other degrees did because I don't know, noticed a lot of people on my degree, not a lot, only a few of them, but they have kind of like, I'm sure this is the same in a lot of STEM subjects, but they have kind of a superiority complex in that they think they must be brighter um, than all the other degrees, which I think I went into it with the opposite. I think I went in with kind of imposter syndrome, like I'm definitely not smart enough to be here. But I thought that a physics degree on paper would give me more options for like career wise after than any other degrees. Say, like I always thought I wanted to go into architecture, but then I did work experience and I actually like I didn't enjoy it that much. And just like I've forgotten what they're called. Degrees where you have a definite outcome. I've forgotten the word for it, but like medicine, veterinary, my sister's now a lawyer, although actually she did a conversion course and she didn't go the normal route. But I just didn't want to get stuck in like a one box. So I thought, oh, well, if people see I have a physics degree, they'll just think that, okay, she's smart enough to figure it out, maybe. And I think it overall, it's worked in my favor. Like I did struggle with it a lot. Like I said, maths never came naturally to me. And I'm sure it doesn't for a lot of people, but I'm really glad that I did it because yeah, I've got a STEM background now on my CV that opens a lot of doors into other things. So that was a slight rant about my degree. Apologies. So yeah, when I got to uni, I was into running. I wasn't quite hadn't gotten into the obsessive phase yet, I wouldn't say. I was excited to have left home, and my mum says it's maybe because I was leaving like the shit that was going on at home. I was kind of glad to be out of it. I don't think I looked at it like that at the time. Maybe I'm sure that was a part of it. I was finding things hard at home. Dad was getting more and more ill. Everyone was really stressed. But I was also stressed to leave it because I had been helping, I wanted to help, and now I felt like I was doing nothing to help. But I did have a really great first and second year. I really like got stuck into, well, I did get stuck into the degree, but I really took advantage of the sports clubs that were on offer because you're only going to go to uni once, and Glasgow Uni had like a massive selection. They were all really good. So I got involved in their Hares and Hounds group, which is the running group, which was always very intimidating. So I didn't really last through that for my entire degree. I found their paces were too hard for easy runs. But I mean, it makes sense. They have a lot of top level athletes there. I got involved in the gymnastics club my first year, which I had great fun at because my flatmate Natalie went with me. So that was really fun. I made a few friends through that. I did try pole dancing the first year, but it was always so busy that you never really actually got into a flow of it. So I gave up on that one pretty quickly. I joined the weightlifting club my second year, and I've made a lot of my good friends through that. Ironically, I'm not a weightlifter. They mostly did powerlifting whilst I was a part of it. They've actually moved on and split into Olympic lifting now as well. But I basically just went and chatted to people, really, is how I used that club. I wanted to get into it because I was injured at the time, so I couldn't run. And I thought, well, maybe that will help me whilst I'm injured. And it did, it definitely did. But really, I just made friends through it and I was busy chatting away. What else did I join? I had a go at all sorts of clubs. I had a go at the tennis club because I did miss it. I did do some adult ballet classes for a while, but it felt wrong because, well, I'd had my teacher back home since I was two, so I'd had her for 17 years. And then in my second year of uni, she passed away, and it just didn't feel. I just haven't done any classes since because it doesn't feel right doing them without her. Um, I'm trying to think what else I did. I was mostly into running at uni. I second year, I definitely started to give it my all, and that's actually when it became quite unhealthy for me personally because, well, sorry, I need to drink out of this ridiculous water bottle for a sec that the doctor has told me to. Mm. Yeah. So in the summer after my first year of uni, I hadn't really been training. I had been running, but I hadn't been paying attention to training, if that makes sense. I hadn't given it a lot of thought. I just went out and ran. Um, but I had been quite restrictive on food since I was kind of 17 when my ballet teacher said I needed to lose a bit of weight. I did. I lost a lot of weight, but then it became kind of a focus in my life. So I wasn't completely healthy, I would say, from maybe, yeah, 17 to 21. But anyway, so I think I was 20 after my first year of uni, and that's when I won a couple of local races when I was back home for the summer. And yeah, after I won those, I mean they weren't big races at all, but obviously it's fun to win anything. Um, so I think that kind of started something in me that I was more obsessive about. I was like, right, I can be good at this if I train properly for it, you know? And I don't think that was good in the end because I had a half marathon that October that I was supposed to do, and I crammed the training for it. I made all the classic mistakes that new runners do, and well, I ended up having an injury in my hip that lasted quite a long time. But I was also ill on the day of the race, and I shouldn't have ran it at all. But I'm stubborn, so I did, and that put me out for a few months. And I think if you're a runner, you hopefully understand this because I hope it's not just me. But when you can't run, like I become even more obsessive about running. Like, oh, I must run. I have to. I'm missing so much. I'm falling so far behind where I should be. And yeah, I went through quite an unhealthy phase with my relationship to exercise. So I was spending a lot of time in the gym, on the bike, lifting weights, not eating enough, which is essentially why I was injured. I think I hadn't eaten enough for what I was doing. It turned out it was hip tendonitis. So as soon as it was actually when I started the weightlifting club in my second year that I got better, both from my eating disorder and my injury, because I don't know if this, scientifically makes sense, but starting to lift heavy weights made me so hungry that I just ate. Like I ate so much and I didn't care about it because I was just starving and I wasn't, yeah. The people in the club had a, I don't want to dive too far into it in case their relationship also isn't healthy. And obviously, I know nothing about it, but the girls in that club were so supportive and had such a different attitude towards food than I did, that it was, fuel, it was building their muscle. They did bulks where, you exceed your calorific intake for a certain period of time so that you can put on muscle. They just had, yeah, they were very good at talking to me about, right, you just got to eat. Like, that's how it is. Um, and it worked. And I'm still friends with some of the girls today. And I think they're amazing. Like, it's just such a different environment to maybe endurance sports in general that I've experienced. So that helped me come out of that. And I actually got my periods back straight away after 4 years of not having them because I was slightly underweight and I'd been over exercising. But this kind of straight after my second year of uni is when I've kind of gone down. I don't want to say gone downhill because I've had some good times since, but it's when my dad passed away, which is obviously a difficult experience for anyone. So yeah, a lot of things coincided together at the same time. So I put on 2 stone, which was great. That was a result. Got my periods back, was doing better, doing stronger, and I was able to start running again after that. But it also coincided, actually, my periods were very bad when they came back. And I'll move on to that in a minute because it's related to what's going on now. But obviously when my dad died, I missed an exam when my dad passed, so the university wasn't going to let me in for the next year unless I had that exam. It was a maths exam. It was maths 2A. I can't remember the name of it. But so I decided that I had to take a year out because I couldn't go and do that exam. Now I just couldn't. There was too much going on at home. We had a funeral to plan. I have to say I don't give the uni the best credit. Like I had an amazing time there. I definitely enjoyed it overall, but with regards to these circumstances, I found them really poor at that time. And I know it's staff dependent who you come across at the time, but it was a very difficult period because they were requesting a death certificate and, telling me that I couldn't come back. And one of your students has just well, they've already had a hard time in the first 2 years studying when their parent was ill back home, but then to treat it so black and white, essentially, that, well, you can't come back if you haven't done this exam, and we need proof of death. Um, I don't think that was great overall, but anyway. And then obviously, with the loss of my dad, your body goes through a lot of different things. I think people react to it in different ways. But mine, I'm only just learning now because my symptoms have carried on for 5 years. Um, I actually looked it up the other day. It's quite literally called broken heart syndrome. But my heart went through changes essentially when you go through a trauma. And so I was experiencing a much higher heart rate than I had previously, which made running quite difficult because even when I was just going for what I would perceive as a jog, my heart rate would be 175, 180, which for a lot of people is them sprinting a 5K. So that was not good. But I did see these symptoms as kind of normal for that time. I knew that I was stressed. I was having kind of like the doctor described it as a permanent panic attack because I didn't know what was going on. I thought I was having asthma, but I essentially just couldn't breathe properly for a few months. So I knew that my body was going through a lot of stress and I knew that my running wasn't going to be normal. I would have to do it, you know, very slowly, slow introduction back. But I also needed something to do at the time. I It's hard to explain the feeling, but you can't just sit and wallow every day. You have to have some kind of thing to focus on, or at least that's how I felt about it. So I actually took up swimming for a while at the time as well because I thought it might be easier on my breathing. But anyway, my body went through a lot of changes in a short space of time, essentially. And so for the last 5 years, I've had a couple better phases where I've definitely got some fitness back and my health back to a certain extent. But I've essentially just gotten progressively worse, especially at running. So I'll go on to that in a minute, but I've had a lot of testing done recently and they're getting to the bottom of it. Obviously, it's about time after 5 years of it. So after that, yeah, in my year out from uni, I started working. I met a boyfriend very soon after my dad passed, and so I was in a relationship for that year. Um, and a little bit, I think it was about a year and a half that lasted until I was firmly back at uni. But that was also something to focus on, something good to focus on. Um, and I started, I'm trying to think, I had three different jobs. So I went back to the pool job for a while, I think, my local leisure centre. But then I started as a apprentice bike mechanic, like a bicycle mechanic, not motorbike. Because I honestly don't know the reason why. I think I had just had it in my head that it was something I wanted to try for quite a while. So I managed to try it and it was great. But COVID then hit, and my mum and sister were both in the vulnerable categories and didn't want me bringing that home from the shop. So I had to leave that job and then I went into beach lifeguarding, and I moved out because, well, I half moved out so that I didn't bring COVID home to my family. And I really, really loved the beach lifeguarding job. I had always had it in my head that I couldn't do it because yeah, pool lifeguarding is totally chill and it's fine, but beach lifeguarding looked a whole different ball game. But then I watched my boyfriend at the time do it, and I figured, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I'm glad because I really enjoyed that job, and I went on to do two seasons. I did one down south where I'm from, and then I did one up in Scotland after my third year of uni. So no regrets on that front. And then I was able to return, well, I was able to half return. Obviously, it was weird times because it was COVID, but I did go back to uni the following year. I was in the year group below me then, obviously, because I had missed out on my third year. So I went back, and long story short, I managed to finish the degree. It was pretty tough not knowing anyone anymore in my year group, although you know you got to see the silver lining of I did have people in the year above me now who'd already been through all of that and could help me. So I do think that was beneficial in the end as well for me. But yeah, it was kind of a lot online learning, which I actually didn't mind. I didn't mind that too much at all because the labs were also online. And I had always been really bad at the physical lab, like experiments. They just let you loose on the equipment and didn't really guide you. So, which is the point. You are supposed to figure it out by yourself. But I was bad at that part. So I didn't mind that too much. And I was able to run through my third and fourth year. In fact, third year, I actually had a pretty good spell of health. My heart rate, I mean, I didn't really know anything about it at the time. I hadn't started to focus on it. I can only see this stuff through looking back on my Strava, which I'm thankful I have. But I realized my heart rate was way too high still. I was able to get back some of my distance, but it didn't feel as good anymore. Running used to feel really, really great. And I loved getting out into the local forest near us. And I knew that it wasn't feeling as good, but I definitely remember still enjoying it in my third year. It was more fourth year where it became predominantly fatigue, eczema, just a whole host of symptoms that came with it. So yeah, since then I what did I do? I graduated and then I I think this is where I may have pushed myself over the edge in terms of like body limits. I was very busy. So obviously I just had exams, stressful, graduating, good overall, but it is a stress impact on the body. And then I immediately went away on a surf trip with my friend in my camper van. And again, obviously that was really fun, really great overall, but it was a lot to take on immediately after all of that. And then I was I was away and training for my first ultra at the same time. Really, I had signed up to this ultra out of stubbornness. It was because I was so fed up not getting where I wanted to in running, not making any progress. I had wanted to run an ultra for years. When I started becoming obsessed with ultra running in my second year of uni, I listened to a podcast, Eric Schranz's podcast, whilst I was in the gym, whilst I was injured. So I got hooked on this idea. Trail runners were the coolest people in the world. I wanted to meet them. I wanted to be one of them. And just, I guess I had always had a slight obsession about distance. I'm not really sure where that comes from. Just, yeah, pain and endurance is like a good feeling for me. But I was so fed up of never reaching that goal. I maybe should have covered this earlier actually. But I was completely obsessed. Like on my dad's deathbed, he asked, what are you gonna do? What do you want to do? And I answered to him. I feel ridiculous now. Keep in mind I was 21 at the time. I'm now 27 and a much older, wiser version. But I responded that I wanted to be an ultra runner. Like my mind was consumed with it all the time. And I still love it now, but that obsessive element of it seems to have gone. This could partly be because I've never reached it. Like my body at different times has just said, no, uh, you know, it's under too much stress. No, you can't do that. Um, but so yeah, I'd signed up to this ultra straight after I graduated because I was so angry at not having been able to sustain that yet. And I think it was I have two opinions on it. I think I loved it. I actually really enjoyed the run itself when I did do it, but I think it was probably the wrong thing. Well, no, not probably. It made me really ill. It was the wrong thing for my body, and I shouldn't have done it. Um, so the run itself was great. It was fine. It was the Tweed Valley Ultra, so it was a 50K, which in my mind, I had already run a marathon the year before, so I thought, I'll be fine. I can hack that. And I guess I did. I did hack it. The run itself, I really enjoyed. And the few days after, I really enjoyed. I was feeling really good. But I think the mistake was I went to a Kaylee that week, the following week, so just a few days after, and I picked a bug up there and I got really ill. And I mean, really, really ill. It was flu, chest infection, full body rash. I couldn't get up. Just probably the most ill I've ever been, really. And since that was November 2022. And since that, I really just haven't recovered fully. So I developed eczema after that. I've now learned what that was. And the fatigue symptoms, I was just uncontrollably falling asleep for a few months. I couldn't help. I just couldn't keep my eyes open, essentially. And that fatigue I still have to monitor at the moment. So if I do too much, then I'm kind of immediately unwell again. So I'm not quite able to, I'm getting there. I'm definitely getting there. I'm eating really well. I'm trying to drink a lot, as you can see. And I sleep about 10 hours a night. I'm careful not to do too much, but I still have to monitor it daily. So obviously running had to stop for a while. My body just wasn't well, it wasn't even really able to go a long walk or anything. I just everything kind of had to come to a stop. And I was job hunting at the same time. I actually started my job the following May. And I was there for just over a year, but I've also had to stop that now. That was actually to go and study a master's at Plymouth, but I'll get on to that in a minute. That's actually not happening at the moment. But I had gotten so burnt out with trying to work full time, trying to get back into running. Yeah, I mean it wasn't the job's fault at all. I loved my job and it wasn't overly stressful. I had a great team, I had a great boss, but my body just like I was falling asleep as soon as I got home. And people kept asking me, oh, well, do you think you're maybe depressed? That's why you're tired all the time. I don't think that. I think I was tired all the time and hence I was feeling depressed. I think that's the way around it went. And my body just wasn't coping with the demands that I was putting on it. So I have, yeah, I've stopped my job. It was an engineering job that I really liked. With the thought that I was going to go and study at Plymouth University, I got in to do applied marine science, and I did go. I was there for the first couple of weeks, struggling to find somewhere to live because I'd left it too late. Um, but then I had a negative experience with a male student there, and I decided that, I wasn't going to cope with the anxiety from that. So I've come home. I am living with my mum at the moment. I do still have my flat in Glasgow, so I'm kind of between the two. But at the moment, I'm just having to focus on going to these health appointments to try and figure out what's wrong with me because my heart rate, as soon as I start to jog, no one's told me to stop running. None of these health consultants have told me to stop running, but still, as soon as I go, my heart rate shoots up to like 180. They've now seen that on an ECG. I know it's not just my watch making an error. Um, and so other sports such as like just walking or cycling, even swimming, they seem to be fine or mostly fine. I just have to be careful not to do too much. But essentially, what I've been told with the running, now that I've had all these blood tests and well, I've had the works really. It was really, really expensive because I went through it privately, but I am glad to find out. I had a DEXA, loads of blood tests, ECG, echo, and they put me on an exercise tolerance test as well. And basically, what I've been told is I'm not going to explain this well at all. I do understand it in my head, it's just translating it into words. But you have two types of nervous system, parasympathetic and a sympathetic, and they're out of kilter in my body. So I think he said I have adrenaline sensitivity. So as soon as my body, running does put stress on your body, you do excrete adrenaline. I don't know if I'm phrasing that right. Sorry, any doctors in the room. But my my nervous system freaks out, basically. I haven't got them in a balance, which does it also explain the fatigue symptoms that I've had. And also, my bloods have shown. I'm not sure how many of you, if you've listened to my other episodes, you will have heard of Red S. But Red S, it stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. So I'm also suffering from low energy availability, which is confusing because I do a food diary. I have been told that I eat enough for what I'm doing. Um, but maybe my absorption isn't going as it should for those energy needs. We're just kind of getting to the bottom of it right now. I need more tests and theories to come out before I know exactly what's wrong. But so the way the doctor I had this appointment 2 days ago where they did all these tests and the cardiologist took me through them, so it should be fresh in my mind. But how he explained it was I'd said about dad 5 years ago when my dad died, I can see that's exactly when my heart rate started showing these symptoms. And he explained that when you go through something traumatic, that's when your two nervous systems can become out of kilter. So, although I've been close to getting back to normal, kind of within the last 5 years, I've had better periods where you know, I could do more. Um, Doing the ultra especially didn't help. And then I've also experienced a lot of stress in the last 5 years through different things that aren't, they're not worth going into. They're private things, really. But all of that stress and the trauma from dad has added up. My body just says no, essentially. So at the moment, I'm having to. He said to essentially figure it out by myself. If I'm feeling good, go a run, but try and keep it really slow, really easy. And maybe just start with walking up the distance, up the intensity. You can go to the gym. He says, really, you can do what you like as long as your body feels good on the day. So it's kind of trial and error. And I'm hoping to figure it out. Now that I know it's not in my head, there is something wrong and I'm getting help fixing it. I'm feeling better about it, not so low. Maybe there's an ultra in my future somewhere. I'm just gonna have to be super sensible about it as I kind of return to what I'd like to be doing. So that's roughly my background in running. I read a lot about it. I read, yeah, I have a book stand in front of me now. They're all running books, really. I've got Scott Direct's book North here next to me. Damien Hall's In It for the Long Run. I still am obsessed with it. I love endurance sports and I love the people who do them. One of the thing that got me hooked on this idea of ultra running was how interesting, kind, funny the people were that Eric Schranz had on his podcast. I used to just get so much comfort from listening to them. And just for me personally, in the running world, the trail, like what to call it, the trail community seems to fit me a lot more than road, which is what I was mainly faced with road runners at uni, and I didn't quite like I love running, but I didn't quite fit into that. And as soon as I heard, all these people speaking on his podcast that I just thought were amazing and fascinating, that's what got me hooked on it really. And I haven't looked back. I love everyone that I meet in the trail community. So that's how this podcast came about. I really look up to them as human beings. They seem to be predominantly very high achieving individuals, which I guess I put that on a pedestal sometimes. Maybe I shouldn't so much. Um, but I love getting to chat to my idols. Yeah, I think my favorite episode is probably Jasmine Lowther that I've had on so far. Although I've really loved all of them, to be honest. They're usually people that I've come across on social media and that I've followed for quite a while. They're also people who've just displayed, good race results. It can be an easier way to find people to interview that way. But the direction I want to go with this is I kind of want to dive into. I like talking about environmental subjects, which is partly why I like Jasmine Lowther's episode. Also Francesco's episode, if you want to go back and listen to that one. But I want to dive into the more. I like hearing people's stories. I really just like hearing people's life stories. But I also like the scientific topics. So I do want to talk about. I mean, yeah, to be open, it's mostly going to be female health related topics because obviously I have an interest in that, especially. Um, but also, yeah, just general endurance focused topics. So I've contacted one scientist to have on for the next episode. Fingers crossed. I haven't had a response from him yet. Um, But that's the kind of direction I want to go with it. I want to hear from people that I think are really cool. I want to hear their opinions. I also want to hear the facts that they know, and I want this to be like a knowledge sharing space. And yeah, I hope you guys are happy following along with that. And I feel like I've just rambled. I want to see how long have I rambled for. It doesn't say, but it's definitely been quite a while. So I hope that's given you kind of some insight into who it is speaking to you. I didn't mean to just moan about my health for a good 10 minutes, which I'm sure I just did. Um, that is because it's very relevant to my life at the moment. Um, with re the next degree that I'm supposed to be, the master's degree, I am returning to Plymouth in April, so I'm looking forward to that. I've managed to get involved in a project there through one of the professors that I met whilst I was there. He's very nice. He's been very helpful and I am looking forward to that. But I won't be going down to live by myself. I think that was partly a mistake on my end that I probably just don't suit living on my own. I've lived with flatmates since I left home, and I think I'm better suited to that. Because yeah, when I had the negative experience with the male student, I went back to a flat by myself and was just scared in the flat by myself. So I need a couple people around. So I'll be flat hunting for that relatively soon. And yeah, I hope to return to running very soon. I don't want to push it. Obviously, I don't want to get ill again, but I feel like I'm talking about running a lot and I'm focused on it a lot, and I do find it frustrating that I can't, get back to the mileage or the paces that I was comfortable with before. It's frustrating to feel like you're on the periphery of this community that you want to be part of. And that's all in my head. I do know that. Um, they're a very welcoming bunch of people. I do know that's in my head, but yeah, I just want to feel better doing it before I put myself out there like that again. So for now, I am happy chatting to you guys about it. And yeah, chatting to people who get paid to do it. I think it's pretty cool that I get to do that. So yeah, thank you for following along. That's a little bit about who your host is. I hope it was helpful. I'm trying to think if there are any more key facts about me that I should say. I don't think so. I could probably babble for quite a while, but I won't. I'll save you from that. Um, so yeah, thank you for listening to today's episode. That is all until next time. If you just if you could subscribe and press the follow button, even do a rating on it's on Spotify and YouTube at the moment. It just helps me out with, getting the podcast out there. I am looking to grow it. It's a very small podcast at the moment because honestly I haven't put a lot of energy into grow I've put energy into doing it, but the growing it side is kind of, I don't know, you have to focus on advertising, stuff like that, and I'm not very good at that. I just like chatting to people and getting it out there. But I do want to grow it to be bigger, which is partly why I thought you should know who's babbling at you. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments, and I will speak to you next time.